Welcome to the 75th episode of the Head Kick KO podcast. Today we are here to preview UFC 277. I'm going to talk a lot about the main card. I'm not going to talk as much about the prelims. It's not that I don't like the prelims, but I think a lot of the prelim fights are fairly one-sided or are not that interesting of matchups. But the 5 fights on the main card, I think, are all very, very good fights. So we're going to spend a lot of time looking at those. And we are going to touch on the prelims fights, but not nearly as in-depth as we are going to on the main card fights. So just a heads up on that before we get started. And that is the only thing we're going to do today. We are only talking about UFC 277. We will be back on Sunday to recap those fights, but for now, we are just previewing. Now, we're obviously going to start this off right at the main event of Juliana Pena versus Amanda Nunes 2, the rematch. Now, I find this fight very interesting because I had a really hard time picking a side in this one. On one hand, you have Amanda Nunes, who, in my opinion, and most people's opinions, is the greatest female fighter of all time. And she lost to Juliana Pena, obviously, in that first fight. And I think it isn't a wild take to believe that Amanda Nunes is going to come back and avenge that loss. But looking at that first fight, Juliana Pena did a lot of really good work. And when I'm evaluating the skills of each fighter, I think a lot of these skills are going to be the same. So when you look at that first fight, we had Juliana, who lost the first round pretty convincingly, and she came out in the second round. Well, before we jump to the second round right away, that first round, even though she lost, Juliana Pena did some good things in terms of making Nunes grapple, and it looked like that made her a little tired. Nunes doesn't have the best cardio. However, in the past, her cardio has been better than what it was in that fight. Now, in the second round, that's when things got interesting because Juliana Pena really started to land her jab, and when she began to land the jab, she then began to follow with some straights behind it, and then she started to throw in some hooks, some wild overhands, and things really got messy there. And Nunes was really doing, I don't want to say a lot of the same because her shots were a little bit more calculated, I believe. She didn't throw as many wild hooks, but she did throw a lot of power strikes. And in my mind, this was both women biting down on the chin guard, deciding, hey, we're going to throw here and somebody's going to come out on top of this exchange. And it worked out for Juliana Pena. And it worked out because she had the chin and the cardio to do what she did and to get through that flurry. Amanda Nunes landed a lot of hard shots. Let's not pretend like Juliana Pena was just making her whip out there. Nunes landed a lot of big shots in that fight. However, she got tired doing so, and Pena's chin did not crack like a lot of Nunes' previous opponents. And once she got tired, Juliana Pena did a great job of landing shots, just constantly touching Amanda. Constantly just boom, jab, boom, jab, boom, jab. Even in the big exchanges where she's throwing 4 shots in a row and 3 of them are wild, it was always started with a jab that connected. So I really like how Pena fought that fight, and then when she had Nunes hurt, she took it to the ground and got the submission victory. Now, I'm really interested at how that translates to Fight 2 because I have a hard time believing Fight 2 is going to go the same exact way. I think Nunes is going to come in with a little bit better cardio. I think Pena will still have an advantage in that department, but I think it would be ignorant for Pena to come in at the same level of cardio. I think it was pretty easy for her and her team to acknowledge that that was something that needed to be addressed. So I think she will have a lot better cardio in this fight. With that being said, Juliana Pena could be more offensive with her grappling, especially early. And I think she could do that by pushing Amanda to the cage. And if she can push Amanda to the cage and get some trips off the cage, I think that would be very beneficial for her. Make Nunes defend some of those takedowns and get off get up off the bottom. I think those are things that could dig into Amanda's gas tank relatively quickly. And I say usually I advise fighters, I shouldn't say advise fighters, but I openly talk about um, fighters attempting single legs and double legs in the middle of the cage and how we don't see it enough. And I'm not always big on the trips up against the cage because it is a lot easier to get up when you are up against the cage. With that being said, in this fight, Nunes is not some bad grappler, right? She probably has a better overall and more well-rounded grappling game. She's very good at jiu-jitsu. So I think in this fight, Pena needs to be really careful with that. And going for takedowns up against the cage could be a way to stifle some of that and kind of keep herself safe, especially if she's doing a lot of trips and throws. Now, even if she can't control Nunes on the mat and Nunes is getting up, she's making her work for it. So she doesn't have to hold Amanda Nunes down. She just has to make her work a lot, especially early in that fight. In the fifth round, I wouldn't advise for the same strategy. But if she can get that wrestling going in round one, I think it could be very beneficial the later this fight goes. And I think this fight is going to go further than 2 rounds, unlike the last fight. Now, I'm interested to see Nunes' game plan because if Nunes gets caught in a lot of exchanges like she did in the second round of the first fight, I think she loses again for the same reason she lost the last fight. However, I think if she comes out and looks to slip the jab and counter the jab, I think she could find a lot more success. I think she could do a lot better at hitting without getting hit and at the same time being more selective in her shots, and that would in turn help her cardio. So I think those are just some things that Amanda could do that could really take this fight from being a 50-50 fight or a slight, Amanda lean. Either way, you want to look at this fight, however you're viewing it outside, looking in. But I think if Nunes can really look to counter some jabs and slip jabs, I think that would swing this fight in her favor amazingly. And another thing that I think could really help with that would be if Nunes kicks that leg more. We saw Nunes do a really good job kicking the leg of Juliana Pena, especially early in the first round. And as that fight progressed, we saw less and less of it. The more that we saw drawn out exchanges with the hands, the less kicks we saw from Nunes. And I think that'd be a very, very good job, or a very good way, to stifle the movement of Juliana Pena, right? Juliana Pena isn't a world-renowned kickboxer who has incredible movement, but I think that if you can even slow her down a little bit, I think it would be very beneficial. It'd make it harder for Pena to walk Nunes down and get her up against the cage. It would make it harder for her to do a lot of things. Maybe some power wouldn't, those shots wouldn't be as powerful that we're hitting her because she can't plant as well on the legs when the lower body when the legs are beat up. So I think that would be a very beneficial game plan. And when you look at that first fight, she even got some knockdowns with those leg kicks. So I think that would be another thing that Nunes could do that could really turn this fight in her favor. So quick recap. The things we saw in the first fight were that Pena had better wrestling, better cardio, and you could make an argument for a better chin, but neither fighter really had their chin cracked. Rather, we saw Pena use her chin as a big advantage to her. And Amanda's going to be the more powerful striker. She is going to be better, in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu department. She does have great submissions. That's what we learned from the first fight. And then things that we could see that may help each fighter. Pena getting some takedowns up against the fence, and Nunes slipping the jab, and Nunes kicking the leg. So those are the things that I'm looking at, where if I see any of those things happening, I'm going to be a lot more confident in either fighter, right? It's very hard to sit here today and tell you what's going to happen in a main event on Saturday. However, I think if you see any of those three things taking place, I think that from my seat at home, I will be much more confident in that fighter winning. So those are some things that I'm looking for. Now, as far as a prediction goes, I feel like this is going to be a much more difficult fight for Juliana Pena. I think that the mental aspect of this is only in favor of Nunes. And that sounds strange. However, Juliana Pena believed that she could win going into that first fight, right? She had 100% belief that she could win. And then she went out there and won, right? So before that fight, she thought she could win. Now going into the second fight, she still believes she can win. So it's not like Juliana Pena is having some, big miracle mental breakthrough that now she knows she can beat Amanda Nunes. She believed that before the first fight. So I don't think there's going to be any change there. However, on Nunes' side, if there was any belief that she was invincible, or any belief that she would just go out there and walk through Juliana Pena, or any belief that Juliana Pena wasn't a incredibly skilled fighter, I think all of those beliefs would be gone. So I think just from a mental standpoint, Nunes is going to be a lot better than she was in that first fight. So I do look at that, and I do think that could help Nunes. Now, and that will make this fight more difficult for Pena. But if you're asking me and pressuring me on a prediction, I'm still going to lean Juliana Pena because of that cardio. Now, like I said earlier, I think Amanda Nunes is going to come in with much improved cardio, but how much can you bridge a gap from going from gassing to round 2 to winning a 5-round decision? And with that being said, a 5-round decision against a good wrestler, right? So if you're tired, defending a takedown is ridiculously hard. And I think that can help Juliana Pena win a couple of those later rounds. And I think that it could help her, in that wrestling even. I think that could help her maybe even edge out the first round. I don't know if she will win that first round, but if she goes heavy wrestling, she may be able to. Now, like I said, I think Pena is my personal pick here. I'm leaning towards a late round submission, a round 4 or 5 submission. I've talked about it 100 times by now, but that cardio, I think we'll see a similar finish to like we did in that first fight. However, it's not going to come until much later. I think it's going to take much more to get Amanda Nunes to that point this time around, but I still see it happening. And like I said, I think it's going to be much more difficult for Pena, but I am going to take Pena by submission in the 5th round. This is the type of fight that could blow up right in your face, and you could go, how do I pick against Amanda Nunes? However, from what I've seen in that first fight, I think Pena can get it done again. And in general, when we see a fighter like Nunes lose that first fight, generally, that slide continues for a minute or forever, depending on the fighter. When we saw Jose Aldo start to lose, he lost several fights in a short period of time. When we saw Silva start to lose, Aldo obviously pulled it back. When we saw Anderson Silva start to lose, Anderson Silva lost a lot of fights consecutively. When we saw, who's another fighter? When we saw Conor McGregor start to slip, he slipped hard. However, when we saw GSP lose to Matt Serra, he turned it around. I really, Daniel Cormier is another great fighter that lost a couple times. However, his losses were to John Jones, who is probably still in his prime, but he did eventually turn it around and find more success in his career. So, this is a spot where Nunes could be in either of those camps, but generally, fighters that lose the belt generally do not do well in the immediate rematch, so I think that is another thing to take into consideration here. Now, let's move on to the co-main event, where we have Brandon Moreno and Kai Kara-France competing in yet another rematch, but this one is going to be for the interim featherweight championship. Now, if you haven't seen the first fight between these two, I cannot recommend enough that you go watch it. Very, very good fight. Very good fight. Very entertaining fight. 3rd round is a very fun round to watch. So from a pure entertainment perspective, even if you don't like watching film on fighters prior to fights or anything like that, if you just like watching fights for entertainment, that is a good fight to watch. And a short synapse for that fight. Kai won round 1, I believe it was, and then Moreno turned it around in 2 and 3. And a lot of it was due to the cardio and body work. And also, this fight had nearly no grappling. Moreno beat him from, I don't want to say below the bell, but Moreno beat him because of the striking. So I think that is another thing to take into consideration. And when I watched that first fight, I know rematches generally don't play out the same. But I ask myself, how is this like it's interesting to me because all of these skills and all of these things that Moreno did to win that first fight are still present. He had a good chin. He had tremendous cardio. He worked to the body. He threw tremendous head kicks at the end of combinations. And all of those things are still things he does today. And I think he can just go right back to the well with some of those things, and those things can result in him winning this fight. And in my opinion, one of Kai France's biggest traits and biggest advantages that he has is he's usually way more powerful than his opponents. And in this fight, I don't think Moreno is more powerful. That's not what I'm saying. But Moreno does have the chin to deal with that power of Kai France, and I think that will play a role here. And it makes it harder for me to believe that that power will be able to get to Moreno. And while the power of Kai France really lasts for the entirety of a fight, I'm not sure that the quickness does. And in order to kind of lose some of that quickness, you have to take a chip out of the cardio. And like I said, that forward pressure and absolutely constant pressure and body work of Moreno does that very well to chip into that quickness of Kai France. Now, in this fight, like I said, I think all of those things will be the same. And even if Kai France is able to bridge that gap, Brandon Moreno is still an incredible grappler. Now, I know a lot of people are going to look at that Kai France versus Askar Askarov fight and say, well, Kai did a good job defending takedowns against Askar Askarov, and he won that fight. So how is Moreno going to be able to utilize his grappling when Askar Askarov wasn't? But the thing is, when you watch that fight, the reason that Kai France was able to win that fight was not because he was some tremendous defensive grappler. He was good defensively grappling. That's not really what I'm trying to say. But he didn't knock it out of the park. He did enough in terms of defensive grappling and takedown defense. The real reason he won that fight was due to the damage that he was able to toll out while those two were on the feet. In this fight, the striking gap is going to be much smaller in terms of Moreno in comparison to Kai France. Their striking is going to be much, much closer than it was for Kai France and Askar Askarov. And the grappling difference is still going to be there. It's going to be about the same. So, if we see Kai France start to pull ahead, even slightly, we could see Moreno really look to utilize his grappling in this fight. And I don't know how. I'm interested to see how much Brandon Moreno is going to lean on that grappling, considering the fact that he did just switch gyms. He was at Entrim, I believe, and now he's training with James Krause. I, for the life of me, cannot name what his gym is called, but James Krause is the head coach. So I'm interested to see the game plan that they chalk up for this fight. I'm interested to see if they ask Moreno to grapple more, grapple less. I'm interested to see that. But, like I mentioned, he should be able to utilize the grappling in the same way that Askar Askarov did, but he won't tire and he won't get absolutely brutalized and hit as much on the feet as Askar did. And the big difference, once again, was this fight's going to be 5 rounds. The last fight was 3 rounds. And in that first fight, walking out, it looked like Moreno could go 2 more rounds. It did not look like Kai France could go 2 more rounds. And that's just basing it off their first fight. I think Kai France is going to have a better gas tank now than he did when they first fought. However, is it going to be a big enough difference or a big enough improvement to add 2 more rounds of Brandon Moreno's pace onto your plate? I have a hard time believing that. Could it happen? Yes. Do I think it's going to happen? No. So, Basically, what I'm telling you with all this information is that I am going to pick Brandon Moreno in this fight, and I think he gets it done by decision. I'm not sure that he finishes Kai France, but I do think he wins this fight. I could see him getting a finish, but I think decision is the most plausible outcome here, unless he really looks to utilize his grappling. If Brandon Moreno comes out with a heavy grappling pace and starts attacking submissions, I could see him getting a submission in this fight, but I will be picking Brandon Moreno by decision. Now, moving on to another really interesting fight is Derek Lewis versus Sergey Pavlovich. Now, my question here is, how did this fight get booked? Because I'm big on trying to point out stylistical matchups that are beneficial to a specific fighter due to the UFC's matchmaking style. That sentence was a mouthful and sounded like something you'd hear in an essay, but basically what I'm trying to tell you is that the UFC will pinpoint someone that they want to grow as a name, and they will give him or her an opponent that plays right into their style. They will basically give them a very easy stylistical matchup. Example, Paddy Pimblett versus Jordan Levitt. The grappling cancels out, and then Paddy Pimblett is a far better striker. That was the prediction and thought process prior to that fight. And we saw Jordan Levitt be unsuccessful in trying to get that fight to the ground consistently. Had a lot of cage control, nonetheless. Didn't really work out for him. Hannah Goldie versus Molly McCann. Hannah Goldie is one of the few fighters in that weight class that is the same size as Molly McCann. They're both 5'4", and that really helped Molly McCann be able to establish her boxing early in that fight because the range difference wasn't as much to overcome. Sean O'Malley versus Pedro Munhoz. The big thing there is obviously the leg kicks. However, if Sean could check the leg kicks, he would have a massive size advantage, a massive height advantage, a massive reach advantage. He could use all of those things. Pedro Munhoz is someone who gets hit quite frequently, and they would allow Sean O'Malley to take advantage of that. So that wasn't a match made in heaven from a stylistical standpoint, but it was a very strong stylistical matchup with 2 or 3 small traits that were leaning in Munhoz's favor. Now, why am I telling you that? A lot of information there that doesn't really have anything to do with Derek Lewis versus Sergey Pavlovich. My question is, was this fight booked because they want to push Sergey Pavlovich and they think Derek Lewis is a good opponent for that? Or was this fight booked because Derek Lewis has fought most of the fighters in the top 10 and they needed someone outside of the top 10 and Derek Lewis wanted to fight in Texas? And Sergey Pavlovich was the only guy willing to accept. Was that the case? Was that how this fight got booked? That's an interesting thought to me, simply because I'm trying to figure out if Sergey Pavlovich is able to defeat Derek Lewis. He's 15-1. He's a great fighter. And when I look at both fighters' styles, both fighters are big-time power punchers. And I don't really like boiling Derek Lewis down to that because I do think he's a lot more than a power striker. But when you look at how these guys win fights, most of the time it is done by landing a lot of heavy shots or 1 or 2 knockout blows that put their opponent away. That's how these guys generally win fights. And you're matching the two up against each other, so you can probably expect the same. And for that reason, it really makes me interested in this fight because if Sergey Pavlovich can really get his jab going, if he can really utilize his length, he may be able to give Derek Lewis some big time troubles. However, when I look at other traits outside of the power punching, a lot of them go in Derek Lewis's favor. Derek Lewis is a much better wrestler than he's given credit for. He's done a very good job at improving his cardio. He obviously doesn't have the best cardio in the world, but for going 3 rounds, Derek Lewis can go a good 3 rounds. He might look tired at the end of it, but he can go 3 rounds. He's much more technical and much more athletic than he's given credit for as well. So both of those things will also play into his favor in this fight. However, can Sergey Pavlovich use his length? This is the big question. Can Sergey Pavlovich utilize his length to keep Derek on the outside and eventually in a big-time knockout blow that hurts Derek Lewis? That is the question here. And if the answer is yes, Sergey Pavlovich wins this fight by knockout. If the answer is no, I think Derek Lewis does. And when I was watching tape, one of the things I noticed was that Sergey was very good at a distance. But when you get him on the inside, he really likes to throw a multitude of shots from that inside. It's almost like it's in between boxing and clinch, right? Very, very close to one another. Um, you could grab and initiate a clinch sequence, but it's not quite that close. They're not in the clinch technically. They're a little bit further out than that. So, in those ranges, he'll throw a lot of strikes. He'll throw a lot of strikes, and I don't think he is that. I don't think he's. I don't want to say he's bad in that sequence, but I didn't see him land a lot of heavy shots. Specifically, if you look at the knockout blow that he landed against Shamil Abdurakhimov, once again butchered Shamil's last name, and I butcher it every time I say it. But regardless, that shot came from a distance. A lot of his knockout blows come from a distance. I think if Derek Lewis can get inside and initiate long, drawn out exchanges in the pocket, I think he wins this fight, and I think he wins this fight by knockout. And I think that is something that Derek Lewis will be able to do. And he's very good in the pocket. In that first round, he had a lot of success against Tai Tuivasa, who is very good in the pocket. Obviously, he lost that fight, but I don't think that Sergey is as good in the pocket as Tai Tuivasa, and I don't think he is as powerful as Tai Tuivasa, especially inside. So I think that Derek Lewis can get inside in this fight, and I think he can get a knockout. I don't know that it'll come in the first round. I'll probably lean second round. I think there'll be some hesitancy, right? I don't think that this is going to be, two guys running directly at each other and just throwing haymakers. I think there's going to be some time where these two look to kind of wait it out, look to throw some jabs or some leg kicks on the outside. And so I think we'll see a lot of that in the first round, but I think eventually Derek Lewis will get a better sense of the timing and a better sense of the range, and I think he can use it to get inside and land that knockout blow. So I will go Derek Lewis by knockout in round 2. Now, once again, moving on, Alexander Pantoja versus Alex Perez. This is another fight that I'm pretty torn on because I like both of these fighters, and I think there are a multitude of question marks surrounding this fight. But first, just looking at Alexander Pantoja, I really like Pantoja as a fighter, right? He does a lot of things very, very, very well. Very good at creating scrambles and then winning those scrambles. And then after he wins those scrambles, he's a threat to submit you. He has very good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. On the feet, I don't want to say he's a simple striker, right? I'll just say that. He's a simple striker, and that is not a diss to Alexander Pantoja because he does what he does, and he does it very well. He throws a 1-2, but that 1-2 is accurate and timed very well and has a good amount of power to it. Alexander Pantoja isn't going to come out here and throw, an 8-piece combo with 2 elbows and 4 shots to the body and a spinning hook kick at the end of it. That's just not the type of striker he is. But he has boiled down the basics very well, and he's good at the basics. And flip that around defensively, he has a very good, read for some of the defensive things that he has to do to get through a fight, and he does those well. Good head movement. He's not some Israel Adesanya defensively, but he is a very good. He's very good defensively, especially on his feet. Also, mixes in leg kicks and kicks to the body. Once again, not anything, world breaking, but he will throw some very solid leg kicks, throw some very good solid kicks to the body, mix in some teeps every once in a while, so some very good body striking and body kicks as well. Now, the other thing that really stood out to me from watching tape was that his cardio isn't great. However, I'm not saying that as a bad thing because he reminds me a lot of Justin Gaethje in a way. And that is in the sense that Justin Gaethje doesn't have world-class cardio. But when he's tired, he will fight, right? Justin Gaethje could be as tired. He could, be nearly out and be so exhausted, but he will continue to bite down on the mouth guard and throw. As long as Justin Gaethje can stand, he will fight. And I see a similar thing out of Pantoja where he doesn't have incredible cardio, but if he's tired, he will not quit. So I think that is a valuable asset in any fight. So I just wanted to throw that in there as well. My concern for Alexander Pantoja in this fight was that I think he can get out wrestled a little bit, and that happened against Askar Askarov, where Askar did a very good job of making it a point to control top position. And I think that is something that Alex Perez can do in this fight. Alex Perez is a very good wrestler. And I think if he makes it a priority to maintain top position, I think he can win this fight. I think that is his path to victory, is to take down Pantoja, stay out of some early submission attempts, and hold Pantoja down. Also of note, he has some really good leg kicks, Alex Perez does. He throws both inside and outside, so that's another thing to look out for on the feet. Also, very heavy hooks. If he hits you with a hook, it's going to hurt you. He throws very hard, and if they connect, they hurt. The X factor with Alex Perez, and this is something that really is the biggest question mark here, is that he hasn't fought since November of 2020. And that can mean one of two things. And on one hand, that can mean, well, he hasn't fought in a couple years, so he's going to have ring rust, so he won't look as good. On the other hand, he hasn't fought in 2 years, but those were, at that point, he was 28 when he last fought. Now he's 30. So it's not like he sat out, years where his skills are declining. He's probably, if he's in the gym and consistently working, he can probably make some improvements, because that is still time of progression for most fighters, age 28 to age 30. So I don't know what we're going to see from Alex Perez. Alex Perez could come out and show tremendous signs of ring rust, but he also could really shock some people with some added skills. Specifically, if he close the gap, because getting submitted was a big issue in his career. He's been submitted several times, and if he decided, hey, I really need to round out that aspect of my game, that would really help him in this fight. If he decides, hey, I really need to round out my striking and I want to become a little bit more technical, and he devoted 2 years to that, he's going to look good on the feet. So I'm interested in that aspect. Now, in terms of a prediction here, I have to lean with Pantoja, but I really think Alex Perez can get it done. I lean with Pantoja because he is a little bit more well-rounded, I believe. And I think he can probably consistently win exchanges on the feet a little bit more. I don't think he has as much power as Perez, but I think that he'll be able to land with a little bit more volume. On the feet, on the ground, I also think he could get a submission here. Like I said, he can get held down, but he could get a submission. I think this is going to be a close fight, but I lean with Pantoja, and I'm going to lean with him by decision. I could see this fight getting finished. I don't really have a good read exactly of how this fight's going to play out. For the main event, for example, I said, hey, here's 3 things that I think could really affect this fight. And I feel like I have a good sense of how those fights are going to play out. This fight has a lot of wild cards that make it really hard to forecast in depth of what it's going to look like. But from a basic skills standpoint, and from, who has been more active and who has fought the better competition, I think a lot of those things lean in Pantoja's favor. I know Perez fought Figueiredo, so don't come at me for saying Pantoja has fought the better competition. I think Pantoja has consistently fought the better competition. So that is my thought process for picking Alexander Pantoja by decision. Now, another fight that I really like, Magomed Ankalaev, 17-1, one of the top prospects in the light heavyweight division, taking on the long-time UFC veteran Anthony Smith. And let me just first say that this fight, I believe, is going to be a lot closer than a lot of people anticipate. I I really like Anthony Smith in this fight, but I don't know if I have the gall to pick him. When I look at this, Anthony Smith does a lot of things that could really cause Magomed Ankalaev some problems. He has some really, really good boxing. Specifically, he's good at getting in the pocket and landing a big-time left hook. Or it's a lead hook, and I believe that he is orthodox, so that should be a left hook. But very, very good lead hook. He kind of steps off the center line and catches guys as they come in. And if there's one flaw that you could point out for Magomed Ankalaev, it's going to be him getting touched a little bit too much in boxing exchanges. He got dropped by Thiago Santos for that same exact reason. Now, on the counter of that point, Magomed Ankalaev is probably going to have more power here, so if he can land, he's going to do damage. He also has very, very good kicks. Kicks to the body very well, which for Anthony Smith, he's not necessarily bad at defending kicks to the body, but I think that is a good path to victory, is kicking him in the body. And especially if you can do that with teeps, that will help him. That will help you keep Anthony Smith out of boxing range as well if you're consistently landing a good teep. So, also the biggest critique of Anthony Smith is probably him getting held down a little bit too much. Alexander Rakic was able to hold him on the mat for a long period of time. Anthony Smith has great jiu-jitsu off his back, but you can't sit on your back and win fights. Now, I think if Magomed Ankalaev looks to utilize his wrestling, I think he could control some position from the top in this fight. Now, I just listed off a lot of things that Magomed Ankalaev can do, but like I said, that boxing of Anthony Smith will be a very big problem in this fight for Magomed Ankalaev. Not only does he have good traits, but he has great timing with his boxing. I don't remember if it was Jimmy Crute or Ryan Spann, but he did a really good job of landing a couple shots in Anthony Smith has 3 finishes in the row. So I don't remember exactly what fight it was, but he was doing a really good job of catching his opponent as they moved forward and landed a lot of powerful strikes because of that and because of his timing. And I'm interested to see what this fight's going to look like because Magomed Ankalaev doesn't really have that high of output. So I'm interested to see if Anthony Smith is going to try and walk him down, get him up against the fence, and really try and outvalue him. I think that could be a way for Anthony Smith to etch out 2 rounds of a decision, is if he can come out with more volume and really land on Magomed Ankalaev. And I think he does have the traits to do that. So I know I just built up this big case for Anthony Smith, but I just feel like Magomed Ankalaev is going to win this fight. I think he can use those kicks to his advantage. But I do think this fight is more competitive than the sports books, and a lot of fans are making this seem. A lot of people make it seem like Anthony Smith is walking out to his funeral here. Anthony Smith is going to put up a fight in this fight, and I think it's going to be very close. I think if I had to predict, I think this fight is a 29-28. I think that is the final scorecard. In terms of a prediction, I'm going to predict Magomed Ankalaev. But if Anthony Smith goes out there and outboxes Magomed Ankalaev and gets himself a victory, I'm not going to be, dumbfounded or terribly surprised. So that was the last fight on the main card. Like I said, I think Ankalaev wins that fight by decision. Now, let's move on to the prelims. Like I said, we are not going to go nearly as in-depth on these prelims fights, but we are going to run through them. Drew Dober versus Rafael Alves. I like Drew Dober in this fight. Alves has very good submissions and great grappling. I think this is going to be a very entertaining fight, but I do like Drew Dober in this bout. Moving on, we have Dontel Mays versus Hamdi Abdelwahab. My bad. Hamdi does have very good grappling. I believe he made an Olympic team. I believe it was Greco-Roman, but I know for a fact it was wrestling. But I believe it was Greco-Roman. Regardless, great wrestler here. Now, I do lean Dontel Mays here because I think he is going to be able to keep a distance and land some big shots on the outside. And I think he's beginning to round out his game a little bit more. So I do lean Dontel Mays in this fight, but I wouldn't be incredibly surprised if Hamdi was able to get on the inside and land some takedowns. Drakkar Klose versus Rafa Garcia. I really like Drakkar Klose, so this may be a little bit biased from me here. So I'm going to lean Drakkar Klose. Like I said, I am a big Drakkar Klose fan. I'm from Michigan, and he's got Michigan tattooed on his chest. How can I not like the guy? So his wins also over Brandon Jenkins. Not Brandon Jenkins. He did beat Brandon Jenkins, but that's not really proving my point. But his wins over Christos Giagos, Bobby Green, Mark Diakase, Lando Venata, I think those are all very, very good wins. And Rafa Garcia, I do not believe, has that strong of a resume. So not only do I like Drakkar Klose, but I really do like the level of fighter that he has beat, and that makes me very confident. I don't want to say that. I don't like saying I'm very confident any fighter wins, but I do like Drakkar Klose in this fight. I think he's beat the better competition. And we did skip Matt Selmsberger versus Alex Morono. Selmsberger is, I believe he was a big-time prospect at one point. That was kind of before I was a big MMA fan. But nonetheless, he's had a good run in the UFC. He lost one fight to Chaos Williams. I'm not going to hold that against him because a lot of people lose to Chaos Williams. Also, who has lost to Chaos Williams? Alex Morono. He's also lost to Anthony Pettis. Now, this fight should be interesting. I'm very excited for this fight. I think this is a scenario where I think Selmsberger is going to be a little bit more powerful, so I think that's going to help him win this fight. So I'm going to lean Selmsberger, but this fight, in my opinion, is pretty 50-50. I'm also not as confident in Alex Morono, simply because when you look at his resume, a lot of his most recent opponents have not been that great. Mickey Gall, good fighter, not tremendous. David Zawada has recently been cut. Donald Cerrone recently retired. Rice McKee also recently retired. So he hasn't fought the best competition as of late. But if you go back far enough, you do see Max Griffin on that resume, and that is a very good win. But I'm still going to lean with Matt Selmsberger. Moving on, going back to where we were at, Michael Morales versus Adam Fugit. Michael Morales is one of the best prospects at welterweight, and I'm not sure that Adam Fugit is, the guy that's going to end this streak from him. I think he's better than people give him credit for. He was very good on the regional scene, and he probably deserved a contract or at least an opportunity to fight on Dana White's Contender Series. So it's not like they went and found some bum to fight Michael Morales, but I do believe that Michael Morales is a more complete fighter and probably going to be the better fighter in the octagon on Saturday. Now, a prelim bout between Jocelyn Edwards and Jin Yong Kim. Jocelyn Edwards is a featherweight, and Jin Yong Kim is a flyweight. Now, I do believe that this fight is taking place at 135 pounds. I've seen some disputes of that. I've seen people say 125, but I believe I'm fairly certain it's at 135. That's what I read from a UFC source. I mean, it was on UFC.com. So either the promotion itself is lying to me or I'm right. Either way, oh well. But I do like Jocelyn Edwards a little bit more in this fight. Obviously, she's going to be the bigger fighter because she was a featherweight previously, even if she's coming down a weight class. I think she's a little bit of a more complete fighter than Jin Yong Kim, so I am going to lean with Jocelyn Edwards. Moving on, we have Nick Negumereanu versus Ihor Potera. Ihor is making his UFC debut. He's got a good win on Dana White's Contender Series. Nick Negumereanu is 3-1 in the UFC. His only loss is to Seg Arbeg Sarafov. Once again, another name I can't pronounce. He probably did not deserve to beat Kennedy Njokuani. That was a very close fight. I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, there were some points taken away from Kennedy in that fight. Regardless, I am going to take Negumereanu in this fight. I know a lot of people like Ihor, but I do like the fighter with a little bit more UFC experience in this one. I'm not the biggest fan of picking fighters coming off of Dana White's Contender Series. However, I will say that I do think Ihor is a little bit more he is a little bit of a better bet in comparison to other fighters coming off the Contender Series, because he does have a much larger resume. At 20-2, he has much more experience than most guys coming in off the Contender Series. However, he hasn't fought the premier competition of the regional scene. He has fought a lot of guys who are not great regionally, so I think that is something to keep in mind. But I am interested to see him here, because if he can get a win over Nick Negumereanu, I would be very impressed with him. And I do think that would be a fighter that I would keep on my radar if he's able to get a win. So I am excited to watch this fight, because he is a very, very good fighter with some strong finishing skills. So I will be excited to watch this, and I hope Ihor proves me wrong and goes out there and gets a finish, because that would add a very talented fighter to this light heavyweight division, which is only 26, so I don't think a loss would really kill him here. So I do have to pick against Ihor, I will root for him in this fight. Now, the last fight we are going to talk about, the first fight on UFC 277, Orion Kose versus Blood Diamond. Blood Diamond is Israel Adesanya's teammate. He is a great kickboxer who made his UFC debut against Jeremiah Wells. Jeremiah Wells is a tough guy to make your UFC debut against. So I do think this fight is going to be a much better fight for him. But Orion is a good grappler, and he has good wrestling, and I think he'll be able to use that here to get himself a win. I do think Blood Diamond could have success if this fight plays out on the feet in extended periods of time, but I just think any fighter with a good game plan fighting Blood Diamond comes in and takes him down, and if you have wrestling in your background, I think that becomes a very, I don't want to say easy game plan, but it's easy to locate that strength and exploit it against someone like Blood Diamond. So I am going to pick Orion Kose in this fight. Now, like I said, that was the last fight on UFC 277. So we are done here. We do have a whole list of picks here. So if I'm wrong, you can let me know all about it in the comments. If you disagree with me, you can let me know all about it in the comments. I don't really care if you do, because it will help the algorithm. So feel free. With that being said, regardless, I thank you for getting this far into the episode, and I thank you for watching the Head Kick KO podcast. Make sure you tune in once again on Sunday, where we will break down UFC 277. I'll talk about the things I liked, the things I didn't like. I'll play matchmaker a little bit, and I'll talk about any other big-time UFC news. I don't think there's going to be much. There isn't much yet. But regardless, make sure you tune in for that. But as always, thank you for watching this episode of the Head Kick KO podcast. Goodbye.
Oh! He front kicked him in the face! Kevin Lee with the ultimate